Why was the night so silent? Captain Mason Reed knew silence in combat never lasted. It was either the breath before the storm or the last gift before the end. At 03:47 hours, pinned down in the cold depression of northern Syria, he tasted that silence like ash. His six-man SEAL team, battered and bleeding, had 90 seconds left before the ridge erupted in fire. 90 seconds before 40 trained fighters swept down with superior numbers, cutting off any chance of survival. Reed's carbine was hot against his palms. His magazines were dwindling, 4 left. He breathed in through his nose, steady, practiced, the way they taught you to hide the fear from your voice. "Sitrep," he whispered into his throat mic. Calm, always calm. His men needed calm even if his gut had tied itself into a hard knot. 4 mags on primary, 2 on sidearm, Ryan Carter replied, every word clipped and deliberate. Communications specialist, steady as steel, conserving oxygen like it mattered. Comms dead, still jammed, no contact with TOC or air. Master Chief Marcus Gray leaned against the rock beside him, sweat and dust carving deep lines into a face built from 2 decades of war. Gray didn't flinch, didn't blink. He just whispered, enemy closing north and east, multiple firing positions, coordinated. His voice carried the weight of every mission he'd survived. But his eyes told Reed something worse. He'd never seen odds this bad. "Wilson's stable but not moving far," Eric Daniels called from the opposite flank, hands buried in the shredded uniform of Petty Officer Wilson. A gunshot wound, narrowly missing the femoral. Daniels had nearly run out of bandages. He'd already patched 3 other wounds among the team, and still the blood came. Reed nodded, eyes darting to Wilson's pale face. They needed extraction in minutes, but none was coming. The tactical picture was simple. 6 men, almost out of ammo, 1 bleeding out, surrounded, cut off, 40 enemy fighters advancing in disciplined lines. It wasn't desperate. Desperate meant you still had a chance. This was final. His mind flickered back, unbidden, to Fallujah 2007. Another hellhole, another ambush. That time salvation had thundered from the sky, 500-pound bombs flattening buildings, dust and fire swallowing the night. But tonight, no salvation. Whoever had built this trap had accounted for every angle. No comms, no air, no escape. A voice cut across the night. Not theirs, not American. A man's voice, English wrapped in an accent. Cold, controlled. "Unknown shooter. Identify yourself. Surrender your weapons, and you will be treated according to the laws of war." Reed exchanged a glance with Gray. Both men knew what that meant. Lies. No quarter. Elite operators captured here wouldn't make it home. They'd be trophies, tortured, executed, paraded across propaganda videos. The team was too valuable to survive surrender. Reed pressed his radio, his call sign, not his name. "All stations, this is Phoenix Actual, final defensive posture. We hold. No surrender, no quarter." The acknowledgments came back instantly. No hesitation. 6 men who knew they would not leave the valley alive. Each shifted for better fields of fire, chambered rounds, thumbed grenades. Each prepared to take as many as possible before the world went black. Reed set his selector to semi-auto. Night vision painted the ridgeline in shades of green. Shadows moved with discipline, too disciplined. Whoever had set this ambush knew SEAL tactics intimately. False intelligence, funneled terrain, perfect choke point, no mistakes. Captain Carter hissed, pointing east. Coordinated assault in 30 seconds, multiple teams, overlapping fire. Reed drew his sidearm with his offhand, carbine ready in the other. He inhaled half a breath. "God bless the United States of America. It's been an honor, gentlemen." The first fighter crested the ridge. Reed sighted him, finger tightening. Crack! The shot came from nowhere. The silhouette fell lifeless. Another crack. Another enemy dropped, then a third. Confusion rippled across the valley. Shouts in Arabic, footsteps shifting, and then silence. "What the hell?" Daniels whispered, staring through blood-smeared goggles. Reed froze, scanning for muzzle flashes. They weren't incoming. They weren't random. They were deliberate, surgical. One after another, the enemy positions collapsed under fire no one had expected. Then through the static, a voice. Calm, confident, American, female. "Phoenix Actual, this is Sentinel. Stay in position. Extraction inbound, 7 minutes." Reed's heart lurched. He almost believed it was a hallucination, but no. The voice was too sharp, too clear, and impossible. No American units were authorized here. No one else should have had their encryption. "Identify and authenticate," he snapped, falling back on protocol. Relief was dangerous. Relief could get them killed. "Authentication not available through this channel," she replied without hesitation. "Your mission was compromised before you left Virginia Beach. This ambush was pre-planned." Before Reed could speak, something dropped into their defensive circle. Gray Dove on it, expecting a grenade, but it was a small pod, American-made, a resupply. Inside, loaded magazines, fresh med supplies, and comm gear far beyond their standard issue. Custom ammunition optimized for their rifles. Stabilized for the humidity, the temperature. Perfect. Too perfect. "Tango down, Northwest Ridge," the voice said, calm as the night itself. "Moving to secondary targets. Command element neutralized." Reed stared through his scope, watching as the battlefield unraveled. She wasn't just picking off targets. She was dismantling the enemy. Command nodes first, then observers, then fire teams, like pulling threads from a tapestry until the whole thing collapsed. Gray whispered, awe in his gravel voice. "She's reading the battlefield like a book." Reed had seen snipers. He'd seen surgical fire. But this was different. She anticipated movements before they happened. Each shot opened space, disrupted coordination, turned 40 enemies into fragments of panic. "Phoenix, extraction inbound in 90 seconds, she said again. And then the roar of rotor blades filled the sky, but not friendly. Carter's eyes went wide. 2 Heinz Mi-24s inbound, rockets armed. Reed's blood went cold. Gunships against their rifles, hopeless. "Sentinel, we need air support now." "Understood," the voice replied. No panic, no hesitation. And then Reed watched the impossible unfold. She didn't shoot the helicopters. She shot the ground. Forward observers dropped. Communication relays cut. Fuel dumps ignited. Suddenly the Heinz were blind, erratic, uncoordinated. Then came salvation. 2 Apache, rolling over the ridgeline with firepower no enemy could withstand. Within minutes, the Heinz were burning wrecks on the sand. Reed's men stared, silent at the transformation. Minutes ago, death had been certain. Now they were alive. "Sentinel," Reed pressed the comm. "Request rendezvous, extraction with us." "Negative," she replied, her voice softer now, almost amused. "Different mission parameters. Stay safe, Phoenix." As the Blackhawk touched down, Reed caught movement on a distant ridge. A lone figure, rifle slung, watching, then gone, like smoke. Hours later, in the sterile debriefing room back in Maryland, Reed sat across from officers who demanded answers he couldn't give. A female sniper, they asked, advanced tech, access to encrypted comms, saving your team from certain death. Yes, that's exactly what happened. They exchanged skeptical looks, a ghost story, an embarrassment, an asset they didn't control. Colonel Fletcher, the legend himself, leaned forward. "In your assessment, Captain, was she hostile, friendly, or something else entirely?" Reed thought of the ridge, of the crack of her rifle saving his life, of the way she had spoken, calm, confident, distant. He thought of how she vanished before they could thank her. "She was friendly," he said at last, "but not ours, not theirs, something else." And in the silence that followed, one truth hung heavier than the rest. Whoever Sentinel was, she had been waiting for them. Why did Colonel Fletcher stay silent so long? In the debriefing room, the air felt heavier than the concrete walls. Reed sat straight-backed, uniform pressed, but inside his stomach burned. Every word he spoke felt like a confession no one wanted to hear. An unknown sniper, female, American voice. Access to codes only command should have, advanced gear, saving them from certain death. Major Reeves, naval intelligence, leaned forward, eyes sharp as broken glass. So let me understand this correctly, Captain. An unidentified individual with unauthorized access to secure comms, operating independently in a classified zone, eliminated 40 hostiles and coordinated extraction you could. Yes, ma'am. Reed's voice held steady, but his throat felt tight. And she gave you no identification, no unit, no authentication. Correct, she identified only as Sentinel. The silence afterward was deliberate, an interrogation tactic, forced the subject to fill the void, but Reed said nothing. He'd survived ambushes and kill houses. He could survive silence. It was Colonel James Fletcher who finally spoke, 70 years old, legendary, piercing blue eyes that had seen the Cold War at its darkest. He cleared his throat, voice gravel-worn smooth by decades. Captain Reed, based on behavior alone, would you classify Sentinel as hostile, friendly, or something else? Reed's mind flashed back. The crack of her rifle, the precision of her fire, Wilson still breathing because she'd intervened. Her words in his ear, calm, confident, almost protective. Friendly, he said quietly. Fletcher nodded, eyes glinting as if that confirmed something he already believed. Major Reeves frowned, shuffling photographs onto the table, grainy satellite images of the valley. Captain, these were taken 6 hours before your insertion. Notice anything? Carter leaned closer, jaw tightening. There, and there, overwatch positions, vehicles that weren't in our intel. Exactly, Reeves said. Someone set overwatch before your mission, someone with access to your planning. Either Sentinel was part of the trap or she was conducting unauthorized surveillance of American operations. Daniels spoke up, voice sharp. If she was part of the trap, ma'am, why save us? She could have let it succeed. Unless, Reeves countered coldly, saving you served a purpose we don't yet understand. The room chilled. The implication was clear. Sentinel wasn't just a savior. She could be a manipulator, a piece on someone else's board. Fletcher sat silent again, unreadable, until finally his voice broke the tension. Captain Reed, in your report you said she dismantled the enemy's command structure with surgical precision, beyond standard operating procedure. Yes, sir. She wasn't just shooting enemies. No, she was collapsing their entire operational framework, like she could see the battlefield all at once. Fletcher leaned back, studying Reed as if weighing more than words, almost as if she wasn't limited to one position, almost as if she had perspective. The rest of the debrief blurred into technical jargon. Questions about the resupply pod, the advanced comm gear, the ammunition that didn't exist in any database. No one had answers, only speculation. When the session ended, Captain Warren gave the order. If you encounter this Sentinel again, you follow procedure. Challenge for identification. If none is given, treat as hostile. Reed nodded, but deep down he knew procedure and reality rarely shared the same ground. As the others filed out, Fletcher's hand touched Reed's shoulder. Walk with me. They stepped into the cool Maryland air, cherry blossoms falling like quiet snow. Fletcher's voice dropped low, personal. What I'm about to tell you, Captain, doesn't exist in records. Reed's pulse quickened. Berlin, 1985. Delta team compromised during a scientist extraction. Perfect ambush. Too perfect. We should have died. Fletcher's eyes grew distant. We were saved by a ghost. Knew our frequencies, our extraction plan, the enemy's disposition. Operated outside official channels. Sound familiar. Reed swallowed. Yes, sir. Fletcher's face hardened. Throughout the Cold War, there were rumors, guardian angels, phantoms who appeared when missions went sideways, especially missions tainted by internal compromise. Not officially ours, not officially anyone's, just there. You think Sentinel's one of them? I think, Fletcher said, that elements inside our government have been betraying special operations for decades, and other elements, unofficial, have been protecting them. The question isn't who she is. The question is, whose interests does she serve? Reed's stomach nodded. Betrayal, not from enemies, from inside. Fletcher handed him a small device, heavy in Reed's palm, an outdated pager, analog. If Sentinel contacts you again, use this. Not official channels, direct to me. Old tech, can't be hacked. Reed stared at it, a line crossed, a violation of protocol, a seed of doubt planted. Sir, this sounds like paranoia. Fletcher gave a humorless smile. Old habits die hard, but so do enemies in the shadows. As Fletcher walked away, Reed felt the weight of the device pressing into his hand, and the heavier weight of the unspoken truth. Someone had wanted his team dead, not by chance, by design. 3 weeks later, on a crisp morning at the Virginia Beach Range, Reed adjusted the scope of his Mk-13 sniper rifle. Focus. Breathe. Exhale. Distance, 800 yards. Wind, 5 knots. You're off by 2 minutes of angle. The voice in his ear froze him cold. Female calm. Sentinel. Reed scanned the range. Empty, secure, she couldn't be here. And yet. You're anticipating recoil, she continued. Your breathing rhythm's off. That last shot would have missed. He adjusted, fired. The bullet slammed dead center. Better, she said softly. Now again. For an hour she corrected him. Not just surface mistakes, fundamentals. Wind reading across miles. Atmospheric pressure shifts. Techniques no training manual covered. She taught him like she had been there 1,000 times. Finally, he lowered the rifle. Why teach me this? Because the next time you walk into a trap, she said, I may not be there. Reed's jaw tightened. You knew about Syria before it happened. How? Silence, then, because I've seen the pattern. Too many missions compromised. Too many Americans dead. Her voice shifted, heavier now. My name was Lieutenant Catherine Hayes, Naval Intelligence. I found the breaches, reported them. They called it stress-induced paranoia, discharged me. A month later, someone tried to make it permanent. Reed's chest tightened. I've been operating alone ever since. Alone, betrayed by her own, saving others anyway. Reed asked the question that had haunted him since Syria. Why us? A pause, then, because you survived long enough to matter, and because you're asking the questions no one else will. The wind whispered across the range, carrying her words deeper than any bullet ever could. Why couldn't he sleep anymore? For 3 nights, Captain Mason Reed lay awake in his Virginia Beach apartment, ceiling fan cutting slow circles above him, the silence louder than any battlefield. Each time he closed his eyes, the same fragments played back. The crack of her rifle in Syria, the sterile questions in the debrief room, Fletcher's voice warning of betrayal, and then her words, soft, calm, certain. My name was Lieutenant Catherine Hayes, and I've been operating alone ever since. She haunted him, not just her voice, the weight of what she carried. 73 compromised operations, 42 Americans dead, not by enemy skill, by design, by betrayal. By their own. On the 4th morning, Reed made his decision. He took Fletcher's Cold War pager in his hand, primitive, analog, almost absurd in the digital world. Its weight pressed harder than steel. With a slow breath, he typed, I need to meet, face to face. Minutes later, the reply flashed back. Arlington National Cemetery, Section 60, 1400 hours, come alone. Section 60, graves of Iraq and Afghanistan, fallen warriors. The message was as much a warning as a meeting point. At precisely 1400, Reed walked among white marble headstones, spring sun painting the grass a soft green. He wore jeans, a windbreaker. Civilian, unremarkable, but inside he was taut wire. He'd switched cars twice, walked the last mile. No tails, no surveillance. You weren't followed. The voice came from behind. He turned. Colonel Fletcher, dark overcoat, slow measured stride. Despite his 70 years, the man carried himself like every step was still combat. "How can you be sure?" Reed asked. Fletcher's mouth twisted in a humorless smile. "Because we've been watching you since you left the metro. Old habits." They walked in silence deeper into the cemetery, past rows of names carved into stone. Fletcher touched one headstone lightly, as though saluting ghosts only he could see. Finally, he led Reed into a maintenance building. Inside, instead of tools, there was a room humming with dated surveillance gear. CRT screens, old radios, paper logs stacked in neat piles. A gray-haired man hunched over the console barely glanced up. Fletcher gestured. "This is Thomas, NSA crypt analyst, retired officially, still has eyes where we need them." Thomas grunted. "Got tired of watching the system rot. Easier to monitor it from the outside." Reed scanned the screens. Intercepted comms, satellite overlays, financial ledgers, evidence. Real, tangible evidence. Fletcher pointed to one screen, a map of recent operations. "These are missions matching the same compromise pattern Hayes identified. Notice the regions." Reed leaned closer. Syria, Jordan, Yemen, Eastern Turkey, all hot zones where Titan Defense Industries held contracts. His stomach sank. "Now this," Fletcher said, shifting to another screen, financial transfers, offshore accounts. Payments spiking after each compromised mission. Every ambush, every body bag, a payday. They create chaos, then profit from the cleanup. Thomas tapped his keyboard, bringing up personnel files. Reed froze as faces appeared. Commanders he'd briefed with. Officers he'd trusted. Some of the highest-ranking men and women in the chain of command. "These are the ones with access to the operational planning you walked into," Fletcher said quietly. "The perfect position to sell you out." Reed's pulse hammered. Betrayal wasn't abstract anymore. It had names, faces, people he'd saluted. "The Jordan convoy," he whispered. "Hayes warned me, said it's another setup." Fletcher nodded grimly. "Disguised as diplomatic cover, weapons transfer, Titan's specialty." Reed rubbed his forehead, the room spinning. "Why hasn't anyone stopped this?" Fletcher's eyes darkened. "We tried. Evidence disappeared. Witnesses died. One whistleblower institutionalized. Another suicide on a straight road in good weather." Reed thought of Hayes, labeled paranoid before someone tried to silence her. She hadn't lied. Thomas's gravelly voice broke in. "What we need is irrefutable. Evidence gathered during the act, recorded, undeniable." The implications settled like lead. The Jordan mission wasn't just another trap. It was also an opportunity. Fletcher studied him. "If you accept, we can equip you. Surveillance gear disguised as standard kit. Analog transmissions they can't detect. Document everything. Contractors, weapons, transfers, the whole machine. And if I refuse? Then you deploy as ordered, walk into another kill zone, and hope Hayes is there again." Fletcher didn't blink. "Your choice." Reed looked at the screens one last time. At the faces of men he once trusted. At the payments drenched in American blood. His throat tightened. "I'll need my team's consent," he said finally. "I won't drag them blind into this." "Of course," Fletcher replied. "They deserve the truth. Brief them somewhere safe. No electronics, no surveillance, old school." 3 nights later, Reed gathered them at Gray's fishing cabin on the Chesapeake. Wood stove, creaking floorboards, nothing digital within a mile. He looked at the men who had trusted him through hell: Gray, Carter, Daniels. Wilson still recovering at base. "I need you to hear this," Reed began. His voice was steady, but inside it shook. What I'm about to share doesn't leave this room, and you walk if you want, no judgment. Gray's eyes narrowed. This about Syria. Yes, and Sentinel. The room chilled as Reed laid it all out. Hayes's identity, Fletcher's warning, 73 compromised missions, Titan Defense's blood-soaked prophet model, the Jordan convoy disguised as diplomacy delivering advanced weapons to non-state actors. For a long time, no one spoke. Then Gray exhaled slowly, weathered face etched with the weight of decades. In 20 years, I've seen missions that smelled wrong, intel too perfect, or fatally flawed, always chalked it up to incompetence. He met Reed's eyes. But it wasn't incompetence, was it? Reed shook his head. Carter's jaw tightened. If this is true, it requires access at the highest levels. People we work with, his voice faltered. My brother died in Yemen. Official report said unexpected contact. But what if? Daniel spoke quietly. Then exposing this isn't treason. It's the opposite. Reed opened the case Fletcher had given him. Modified armor inserts, earpieces, med packs, every item recording, transmitting, invisible to standard checks. We deploy as ordered, but we document everything. Contractors, weapons, recipients, irrefutable proof. Carter stared at the equipment, then at Reed. If we're wrong, we're ruined. If we're right, he swallowed hard, we might not live to deliver it. Reed met his gaze. We'll live long enough, because the truth will already be out there. Slowly Carter nodded. I'm in. Gray's voice was firm. So am I. Daniels didn't hesitate. Me too. Reed's chest swelled with something heavier than pride. It was resolve, the kind that felt like chains and wings at the same time. That night, alone in his apartment, he got the text, rooftop, now. He checked the hallway, clear, took the stairs, hand near his concealed sidearm. The April air was sharp, stars faint against city glow. You can relax, Captain. If I wanted you dead, you wouldn't be up here. She stepped from the shadows near the HVAC unit. Catherine Hayes, not a myth, not a voice, flesh and bone, 5'8", athletic, brown hair cropped short, nothing extraordinary, nothing that screamed the phantom who had dismantled 40 enemies in Syria. Lieutenant Hayes, he said carefully. Former lieutenant, she corrected. Just Hayes, or Sentinel if you prefer the myth. He studied her. Names help me keep track of who's real. She almost smiled. Plenty with names in official records aren't real at all. Why risk this meeting, he asked. Our deployment's in 12 hours if we're burned. We're not, she cut in. I've been monitoring every approach since you got home. It's secure for now. He felt the weight of her certainty. It wasn't arrogance, it was precision. You said Jordan's a setup. Now you're saying what? There's more. Her expression hardened. The security detail looks like diplomats, but they're Titan's men, former military, private contracts, and the weapons aren't small arms. My sources indicate advanced systems, man-portable air defenses, possibly anti-tank guided, the kind of hardware that can down airliners or destabilize an entire border. Reed's pulse quickened, and we're covering the handoff. Exactly, and when it's done they'll erase witnesses, you and your team. She handed him a small case, specialized surveillance gear, calibrated for weapons ID. Document everything, every crate, every serial, every face. If we get proof of advanced systems being transferred, there's no way they bury it quietly. Reed accepted the case, its weight pulling against his arm. One question, he said, why me, why us? Hayes studied him a long moment. Her eyes, sharp and tired, softened just slightly. Because you still believe the oath you swore, to defend the Constitution, not men, not institutions, and because when I saved you in Syria, you didn't just survive, you looked for the why. The rooftop wind tugged at her jacket, and in her silhouette Reed saw not a ghost, but a soldier still fighting, long after being cast out. 600 deployment, she said. From that moment on, assume every comm is compromised, except Fletcher's gear. Understood. Understood. Reed hesitated, then spoke. Hayes, thank you for Syria for this. She paused at the rooftop edge. Don't thank me yet, Captain. The hardest part isn't exposing the truth. It's living with the consequences. And then she was gone, melting into the night, leaving Reed with only the stars, the mission, and the unbearable weight of what tomorrow might bring. Why did the convoy commander smile too much? At 900 local time, Reed's team arrived at the forward operating base outside Amman. Heat pressed down like a weight, desert air dry enough to sting the lungs. The convoy sat idling, 3 black SUVs marked with State Department plates, armored engines rumbling. 6 so-called economic development advisors waited nearby, their posture too sharp, their eyes too alert. Diplomats weren't supposed to scan rooftops or adjust concealed holsters under pressed blazers, but these men did. Reed felt his instincts prickling even before the briefing began. Richard Keller introduced himself as convoy commander, polished suit, salt and pepper hair, his smile easy, professional, but his cadence, it wasn't diplomatic, it was military. He laid out the plan on a digital map, voice precise, technical. Our route takes us through pacified territory, several choke points but manageable, counter-ambush protocols in effect. Gray caught Reed's eye, a silent message. He's not State Department, not even close. Reed asked the question anyway, playing the role. Duration at the border site. Approximately 90 minutes. Infrastructure discussions, not politics. Too vague, always too vague. Understood, Reed replied evenly. My team will maintain perimeter security, standard protocols. Perfect, Keller said, flashing that same professional smile. But behind the smile, Reed saw calculation. The convoy rolled out 30 minutes later. Dust plumed behind them, the SUVs riding heavy, modified suspensions creaking under unseen weight. Reed rode front right in the second vehicle, Carter beside him monitoring comms. Gray and Daniels held overwatch from the third SUV. For the first hour, everything looked routine. Local checkpoints waved them through. Children played near roadside stalls. A goat herd crossed, kicking dust into the air. But Reed noticed Keller's men, too relaxed, no nerves. They weren't worried about threats. They were worried about exposure. And Carter noticed something else. They're switching frequencies, he murmured, eyes locked on his equipment. Every 20 minutes, patterned. State Department doesn't use this, it's Titan protocols. I've seen it before. Reed nodded, jaw tight. Hayes had been right again. As they neared the border, the landscape shifted. Villages thinned. Sand and stone replaced the color of life. The convoy pulled into an abandoned warehouse complex, surrounded by sparse perimeter guards in mismatched Jordanian uniforms. Reed's eyes narrowed. The patches were wrong. The boots too new. Contractors dressed as soldiers. Keller, Reed called over, keeping his tone professional. Perimeter security will be maintained at all times. Of course, Captain, Keller replied smoothly, but our counterparts prefer discretion, only my team inside. That was the break in the act. No true diplomatic security team would allow their principals out of sight, not for a moment. And yet, Keller brushed it aside like protocol was irrelevant. Reed signaled his men subtly, activate the hidden surveillance gear Fletcher had provided. Their armor inserts, optics, and comms hummed alive, recording every move, every face, every crate. Through his scope, Gray caught the first tell. A second convoy approaching from the east, 6 vehicles, no markings, movement tight, military discipline. Unknown convoy inbound, Reed reported into the official channel. Keller didn't flinch. Our Jordanian counterparts expected. But when Gray zoomed in, his voice went flat. Those aren't Jordanians. Gear profile matches northern Syrian groups, separatists, non-state actors. Inside the warehouse, Keller's team unloaded heavy, hard-sided cases. Reed's optics caught a glimpse as one lid cracked open. Missile tubes, man-portable air defense systems, just as Hayes had warned. Carter's voice came low through the secure channel, recording every detail: serial numbers, faces, vehicles, transmission solid. Reed swallowed the knot in his throat. This wasn't just a transfer. Keller's men weren't simply handing over weapons. They were training, demonstrating systems, sharing targeting data. Reed's stomach dropped as he realized what Gray whispered from Overwatch. They're not just selling weapons, they're directing attacks, flight paths, approach vectors, NATO schedules. Reed's blood ran cold. This was treason in its purest form. For an hour, his team documented every move: crates changing hands, separatists loading restricted weapons into their vehicles, Keller exchanging financial confirmations, every detail captured by Fletcher's equipment, transmitted to servers that couldn't be erased. Then Carter stiffened. "Captain, problem." Reed's heart stilled. "Say it." "Our transmission was pinged. Active scan. Someone searching for Cold War-era protocols, exactly what we're using." Reed's pulse thundered. "Fletcher said it was undetectable." "Not to them," Carter hissed. "Someone knew what to look for." And then Keller stepped from the warehouse. Smile gone, posture sharper, sidearm just a breath away from his hand. "Captain Reed," he called across the yard, his voice calm but laced with steel. "A moment of your time." Reed approached, every step deliberate, the desert sun pressing heat into his skull. Keller's eyes studied him. "Fascinating technology you're carrying. Old, effective, not exactly standard issue." Reed kept his face neutral. "All our equipment is standard, sir. Perhaps interference from local systems." Keller's smile returned, thin and cold. "Loyalty is a complicated virtue, Captain. Most think it means obedience to chain of command. But true loyalty," he leaned closer, "requires judgment, judgment about which interests truly serve the nation." Reed's stomach churned. It wasn't just a confrontation, it was a test, an invitation or a threat. "My loyalty is to my men," Reed said evenly, "and the mission." "Of course," Keller said smoothly. "And today's mission is diplomatic protection, isn't it? Not unauthorized surveillance." Gray's voice came low through the comm. "Multiple armed personnel moving into flanking positions, not separatists. New players, tactical gear, coordinated." Reed gave the faintest nod, eyes locked on Keller. "My team is here for security, sir, nothing more." Keller tilted his head, studying him like prey. "Good, because unauthorized surveillance would be problematic." The unspoken word hung heavier than the desert air. Treason, elimination, burial in sand. Reed forced himself to nod. "We should prepare to depart. Return window closes in 90 minutes. But Keller's smile sharpened like a blade. "There's been a change of plans. My team will return to Amman with the Jordanian detail. Yours will remain here, provide security for additional meetings." A death sentence, disguised in politeness. "Sir, our orders specify close protection." "Orders change, Captain." Keller's voice hardened. "Particularly when circumstances require flexibility." Behind him, Reed heard the metallic click of weapons being readied. Sidearms raised, safeties off. Keller's men had dropped the mask. "Actually, Captain," Keller said softly, "it's best if you and your team surrender your weapons. Standard protocol." Reed turned slowly, confirming what he already knew. Surrounded, outgunned, the fiction of diplomacy gone. He raised his hand slowly, deliberately, mind racing, calculating distances, angles, the geometry of survival. Then he spoke calm as ever, "Standard protocol." And in the pause that followed, everything hung on a single, fragile thread: whether the phantom who had once saved them was still watching. Why didn't Keller pull the trigger himself? Reed felt the weight of a dozen weapons trained on him. Keller's smile was calm, almost paternal, as though this wasn't execution but correction. Around the compound, men shifted into flanking arcs, their movements too polished for mercenaries, too quiet for militia. Professionals, killers. "Captain," Keller said smoothly, "I had my suspicions about you from the beginning. The way your eyes tracked equipment. The way your communications officer lingered too long on frequencies. Small things, but telling." Reed's heart hammered, but his hand stayed steady, still halfway raised. Every second counted, every breath. He could almost feel the crosshairs of his men behind him. Gray in overwatch, Carter crouched near the vehicles, Daniels with Wilson's bandaged form. All waiting, all watching. "I've been in this business long enough to recognize surveillance," Keller continued. "The question is, who are you working for, official channels or something else?" Reed let his breath go slow, controlled, calm, as if the barrel inches from his chest didn't matter. "With respect, sir, I don't know what you're implying. We're here under direct orders to protect diplomatic personnel." Keller's smile faltered for the first time. "Not much, just enough. Let's not play games. We both know this isn't about diplomacy." His tone sharpened, cold steel hidden in velvet. "The only question left is whether you leave this compound alive or become unfortunate casualties of separatist aggression." The desert heat pressed harder, the silence broken only by distant footsteps and the faint rattle of gear. Reed's earpiece crackled, Gray's voice steady as granite. "6 visible from my position. 3 more east side, setting up crossfire." Reed gave the faintest tilt of his chin, a signal only his men would understand. "Prepare." He looked Keller in the eyes and spoke low, steady. "You've miscalculated." Keller raised a brow. "And what's that supposed to mean?" Reed's lips barely moved. "We're not alone." The single crack of a rifle shot shattered the silence. One of Keller's men collapsed mid-step, a neat hole punched through the armor seam at his ribs. A perfect shot, a ghost's signature. Chaos erupted, shouts, weapons snapping up, dust spraying as rounds impacted concrete. Reed dove sideways, dragging his sidearm clear as the compound lit up in gunfire. He fired controlled bursts, rounds slamming into cover, forcing Keller's men to scatter. "Sentinel engaged," Reed called over Fletcher's secure channel, voice clipped but burning with relief. "All units execute extraction protocol." Carter's voice came fast. "Evidence transmission complete. Remote servers locked." Gray's rifle thundered from overwatch, precision bursts cutting down 2 hostiles moving for the eastern flank. Corridor forming northwest corner, sentinels shaping the battlefield. Through the din, Reed could see it, the pattern he remembered from Syria. Her fire wasn't random. Each shot wasn't just a kill. It was geometry. She collapsed defensive nodes, disrupted lines of fire, created seams where none had existed. "She's building us an exit," Reed muttered, snapping shots over the hood of a truck. "Wilson's hit again," Daniels shouted from cover, his voice tight with strain. Reed sprinted, bullets cracking overhead, diving into cover beside him. Blood soaked Wilson's thigh again, but Daniels had already clamped a bandage, hands moving with practiced speed. "He can move with support," Daniels said, breathless. Reed's jaw clenched. "Then we move." "Carter," he barked into the mic. "Bring primary vehicle south barricade. Gray, suppress warehouse entrance. Deny reinforcement." "Copy," Gray replied, his fire doubling in intensity. Reed slung Wilson's arm over his shoulder. The wounded SEAL groaned but moved, each step agony. Bullets punched into walls, ricochets sparking near their boots, but Sentinel's fire cut through the chaos, sharp, surgical, relentless. 3 down West Ridge, her calm voice slid into his ear. 2 more adjusting, corrected. Reed dragged Wilson into cover beside a shipping container. Sweat burned his eyes, his chest heaved. "Carter, status." "Vehicle hot," Carter shouted, engine roaring to life. "Route open, sentinels cut half their flank." Reed's earpiece crackled again, Gray's gravel voice. Keller moving toward third SUV. He's recovering something. Looks like hardened laptop case. Reed froze. Evidence. Records. The proof. If Keller escaped with it, the conspiracy would erase everything. Engage, Gray asked. Reed squinted, scanning through the haze of gunfire. Keller crouched near the SUV, weapon drawn, prying open a compartment. No clear shot. No clean angle, Gray said. Reed's decision was instant. Maintain overwatch, I'll intercept. Carter's voice came sharp. Sir, that's suicide. It's evidence we can't lose, Reed snapped. Execute orders. He moved low, sprinting between cover as Sentinel's fire cracked overhead. Each shot felt like a hand clearing his path, striking just when he needed it. He slid behind a concrete barrier 10 feet from the SUV. Keller ripped the laptop free. His head snapped up at the movement. Their eyes locked. Two men on opposite sides of a truth neither could bury anymore. Drop it, Keller, Reed barked, weapon steady. Keller's smile flickered, bitter now. You have no idea how deep this goes, Captain. I know enough. Weapons to separatists, target data against NATO, American lives sold for profit, treason. Keller's voice turned sharp, venomous. You think you can expose it. You think evidence matters. These people, he gestured skyward with a jerking hand, control everything. Erase entire units with a whisper. You're an insect in their machine. Reed tightened his grip. Maybe, but this insect already transmitted every detail. For the first time, Keller's face cracked. Shock, a recalculation. You're working with her, the ghost. I'm working for my oath, Reed shot back. To defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Keller sneered. Then you won't live long enough to see the fallout. His eyes flicked past Reed's shoulder. Instinct screamed. Reed dove sideways just as gunfire tore the air where he'd been standing. One of Keller's men had flanked. Rounds sparked off the concrete. Reed rolled, fired 2 clean shots. The hostile crumpled mid-stride. But Keller had seized the distraction, sliding behind the SUV's engine block, laptop case still in hand. Bullets slammed into the barrier around Reed, forcing him low. The air was a storm of heat and noise. Gray's voice cut through the chaos. More hostiles moving east side. They're locking us in. Reed's breath came fast, adrenaline burning, his options narrowing. Keller pinned, his team pressed, Wilson bleeding, extraction slipping away. And then 3 sharp cracks, Sentinel's fire, each shot precise, each impact ripping apart the suppressing positions, pinning Reed down. The battlefield geometry shifted in seconds. Again, she had opened the door. Reed surged up, weapon steady, shouting over the chaos. Keller, last chance, drop it. But Keller didn't drop it. His jaw clenched, eyes blazing with defiance. And in that frozen second, Reed understood. Keller wasn't afraid of death. He was afraid of exposure, afraid of what the laptop held. Reed's finger tightened. The battlefield held its breath. Why didn't Keller run when he had the chance? For a moment, the world shrank to 2 figures in a desert compound. Reed with his weapon steady, lungs burning. Keller crouched behind the SUV, laptop clutched like a lifeline, eyes bright with a conviction twisted by greed. You don't understand, Keller spat, voice harsh over the crack of gunfire echoing around them. These weapons aren't betrayal. They're balance. The world doesn't survive on ideals, Captain. It survives on leverage, on control. Reed's breath steadied, finger tight on the trigger. Selling air defenses to terrorists isn't balance. It's chaos, and Americans will die because of you. Keller's lips curled into something almost like pity. Americans always die, Captain. The only question is, who profits from it? A shot rang out sharp, surgical. Reed flinched, thinking for an instant Sentinel had fired, but it wasn't aimed at him. Keller jerked. His eyes went wide. A single neat hole bloomed just below his temple. He dropped like a marionette with its strings cut, the laptop case tumbling from his hands into the dust. Reed's chest seized. "Sentinel," he whispered into the secure channel, but no response came. The battlefield roared back around him. Hostiles poured from the eastern flank, automatic fire shredding concrete. Dust choked the air, visibility collapsing into chaos. "Captain," Carter's voice urgent. "We're taking heavy contact. We can't hold much longer." Reed sprinted forward, scooping the laptop case in one motion. He slammed it against his chest, slung Wilson's arm back over his shoulder, and shouted into the mic. "Gray, suppress east. Carter, prep vehicle for full exfil." Gray's rifle thundered from Overwatch. Daniels lobbed smoke grenades, clouds billowing to carve cover where none existed. The team moved like one body, each part broken but still alive, still fighting. Reed shoved Wilson into the SUV, Carter already behind the wheel. "Go." The engine roared, tires spitting sand. Hostile fire slammed into the vehicle's armor plating, windows spiderwebbing but holding. Gray leapt from his position, landing hard in the back seat, chest heaving, face carved in stone. Reed twisted, firing through the rear window, covering their retreat. Dust clouded their wake, smoke grenades mixing with desert haze. "Route northwest blocked," Carter barked, jerking the wheel as rounds pinged off the frame. "Enemy vehicle in pursuit." Reed glanced back. A technical truck roared after them, mounted DSHK heavy machine gun spitting fire, tracers carving lines through the air. "Gray," Reed shouted. Gray swung the MK-13 rifle out the shattered rear window. He inhaled once, calm, even in chaos, exhaled and fired. The round punched through the gunner's chest, dropping him mid-burst. A second shot shredded the driver's windshield. The truck veered hard, rolling in a cloud of dust and fire. But more headlights flared behind them, 2 more vehicles closing fast. Reed's pulse hammered. "We need air now." Silence, only static, then her voice, calm, precise like before. "Extraction inbound, keep moving." Relief surged through him like oxygen. Sentinel was still here, still watching. "Carter," Reed snapped, "hold steady on course. Daniels, rear suppressive." The SUV bounced hard over rutted ground, shock screaming, armor groaning. Wilson groaned too, pale and fatting but alive, always alive. Minutes stretched like hours. Gunfire hammered, engines roared, dust blinded, and then rotor blades, low, fast. 2 Blackhawks cut across the horizon, side gunners opening up with streams of 7.62, shredding the lead pursuit vehicles. Explosions lit the desert, fireballs clawing skyward. "Eagle Flight, we have you," a pilot's voice crackled over comms. "Marking hot LZ ahead, 2 minutes." Carter pushed the SUV to its limits, every jolt threatening to tear it apart. Reed clutched the laptop case tight, knuckles white, eyes scanning every ridge, every shadow. "Sentinel," he called again, desperation breaking into his voice. "Confirm position, confirm identity." Only static answered. The Blackhawks descended, skids slamming into sand. Reed's team belayed, dragging Wilson, shoving him aboard. Carter scrambled in, Daniels right behind, Gray covering with brutal efficiency. Reed was last. He turned once more, scanning the horizon, for her, for Hayes, for the phantom who had carved open death and handed them life. But there was nothing, no silhouette, no movement, no trace. He climbed aboard, signaling the crew chief, "Go, go." The helicopter surged skyward, desert shrinking below. Gunfire chased them but fell short, tracers swallowed by distance. Only when the ground blurred into miles did Reed let the laptop case drop into his lap. Heavy, untouched, proof. Carter's voice was raw, almost disbelief. "We actually made it." Daniels checked Wilson's vitals, relief softening his bloodied face. "He'll make it too, barely." Gray sat back, rifle across his knees, eyes distant. "Not all of us." Reed turned. Keller's body burned somewhere in that desert, evidence saved, truth captured, but Sentinel, the one who made it possible, remained a shadow. He stared out the open door, wind tearing at his face. For the second time she had pulled them from certain death, and for the second time she had vanished without a word. Back at the forward base, the debrief was chaos. Officers argued. Some demanded immediate custody of the laptop. Others questioned Reed's decisions. Words like protocol breach and unauthorized surveillance filled the room. Reed said little. He handed the laptop to Fletcher directly, ignoring every glare, every accusation. Fletcher's eyes burned with something Reed had never seen in him before. Not anger, not even triumph, but vindication. "You did well, Captain," Fletcher said, voice low. "This is enough, enough to make them flinch." But Reed felt no triumph, only exhaustion, only the ache of something unfinished. Because as he left the room, one question gnawed at him more than all the others. Where was Catherine Hayes now? Why did the room feel colder, with the evidence sitting right there? The laptop sat on the polished oak table like a live grenade. Reed watched as technicians connected cables, monitors flickering to life. Fletcher stood nearby, arms crossed, his face unreadable. Officers filled the room, some hungry for vindication, others tight-lipped with fear. When the first files loaded, silence fell. Serial numbers, shipment manifests, transaction records linking Titan Defense to offshore accounts, surveillance photos of men Keller had called diplomats handing weapons to separatists, schedules of NATO flights marked in red. Evidence undeniable. Reed glanced around the table. Some faces drained pale, others turned hard, defensive. Major Reeves slammed a pen against her notebook, jaw clenched. "If this is authentic—" "It is authentic," Fletcher cut her off, his gravel voice sharp. "These are internal Titan records, password-protected, encrypted with military-grade algorithms. You don't fake this without the original keys." The general at the end of the table cleared his throat. His ribbons caught the fluorescent light, gleaming too brightly against his starched uniform. "Colonel Fletcher, Captain Reed, I caution against rash assumptions. A single laptop doesn't constitute systemic betrayal. It could be the work of rogue contractors." Fletcher's eyes narrowed. Rogue contractors don't have access to flight paths and mission planning. Rogue contractors don't redirect entire special operations units into ambushes. The general's gaze slid across the room, avoiding Fletcher's. "Then this is above our level. Leave it where it belongs. Higher channels will resolve it." Reed's stomach twisted. He knew what that meant. Higher channels, the same ones who'd buried evidence before, the same ones who'd erased Hayes. After the meeting broke, Fletcher pulled Reed aside. The old man's voice was low, dangerous. "They'll stall. They'll bury. They'll delay hearings until the public's distracted. We have the evidence, but the machine is built to protect itself." Reed stared at the floor, jaw tight. "So what's the point, sir, if it all disappears?" Fletcher's gaze softened just slightly. "The point is we don't stop. Truth has weight. Even if they bury it, cracks spread, leaks form. Eventually, the weight becomes too much to hide." But Reed couldn't shake the gnawing feeling. Keller had died with defiance in his eyes because he knew something bigger, something Sentinel had hinted at but never fully revealed. That night, Reed sat in his apartment with the curtains drawn, his sidearm resting on the table. He replayed Hayes's words in his mind. The hardest part isn't exposing the truth. It's living with the consequences. He wondered if she was out there now, watching him again, or if she had already vanished into the endless shadows she seemed to call home. The pager Fletcher had given him buzzed once, a single message, "Roof, midnight." Reed's pulse quickened. He grabbed his jacket, checked the hallway, and climbed. The rooftop air was cool, city lights painting the night. For a long moment he thought it was empty. Then a figure shifted near the ledge. "Catherine," he breathed. She stepped into the faint glow. Ball cap low, jacket dark, rifle slung casually across her back. Ordinary, almost forgettable, until she spoke. "You kept the laptop safe." Reed studied her, the ache of weeks boiling up in his chest. "We handed it to Fletcher. It's being processed." Hayes tilted her head. "Processed, buried, reframed. That evidence won't see daylight for months, if ever." "Then why risk everything to get it?" Reed demanded. His voice cracked, sharp with frustration. "Why save us, twice? Why put yourself out there if you're just going to vanish?" She didn't answer right away. She moved closer, her eyes catching the faint light. They were tired eyes, tired but burning. "Because every piece matters. Even if they bury it, it forces them to work harder. It stretches their lies thinner. Someday, Captain, the dam breaks. And when it does, we'll need men who haven't forgotten their oath." Reed stepped closer. "And what about you? You've been fighting this alone for years. You can't carry this forever." A flicker of something passed over her face, pain maybe, regret. "I don't plan to carry it forever." He frowned. "What does that mean?" Hayes looked past him out over the city. "There's a list on that laptop. Hidden, but it's there. Names of handlers, facilitators, not just contractors, officials, uniforms, people who swore the same oath we did." The word cut through Reed like a blade. Officials, people inside. The betrayal wasn't limited to Keller, it was systemic. "Why tell me this now?" he asked quietly. "Because they'll come for you," she said flatly. "Your team, your family, anyone tied to that laptop. They'll try to silence you like they tried to silence me. The only reason you're still breathing is because they can't confirm what you know. Yet." Reed's fists clenched. "Then help me fight them. Don't disappear again. Don't leave this on our shoulders alone." For the first time she smiled, not mocking, not amused, sad, gentle. "You don't get it, do you? My existence is the very reason they hesitate. As long as I'm a ghost, they can't be sure what I'll expose next. That uncertainty is leverage. The second I step fully into the light," she trailed off, shrugging, "I lose it." Reed shook his head. "That's no way to live, that's not living," she finished for him. "I know." They stood in silence, the city hummed below them, the distance between them heavier than miles. Finally she pulled something from her pocket, a small drive. She pressed it into his hand. "Backup of the list, hidden under layered encryption. Don't open it, don't even carry it on electronics. Lock it away. When the time comes, you'll know." Reed stared at it. "Why me?" "Because you still believe," she said softly. "And because I don't know how much longer I can keep this up." The words chilled him more than the night air. Before he could answer, she stepped back into the shadows. "Catherine," he called, his voice caught. She paused once, half-turned. For an instant he thought she might stay, but then she was gone. Reed stood alone, the drive burning in his palm, her absence heavier than her presence had ever been. The next morning Fletcher summoned him again. The colonel's face was grim. "Keller's death is already being spun as insurgent retaliation. The laptop compromised. Select files vanished before the analysts secured it. Internal leak." Reed felt his stomach drop. "You mean?" "I mean they're already rewriting the narrative," Fletcher growled. "We're not just fighting enemies abroad. We're fighting ghosts in our own house. And Hayes was right. They'll come for you." Reed said nothing. He just touched the hidden drive in his pocket. Why did the silence feel heavier than combat gunfire? The base was unusually still when Reed walked across the tarmac that night. No drills, no idle chatter, just the low hum of floodlights and the whisper of desert wind. He knew what silence meant. Silence was the sound of a hunt beginning. His pager buzzed once in his pocket. Fletcher. A summons. Reed followed the path to the colonel's office, every step echoing in his bones. Inside, Fletcher's face was carved in stone. Papers lay scattered across his desk, files half-burned, shredded reports spilling from bins. He didn't look up when Reed entered. "They've marked you," Fletcher said finally. His voice was hoarse, stripped bare. Your team, Carter, Daniels, Gray, they'll move soon. Reed's throat tightened. Because of the laptop. Because of the laptop, because of Hayes, because you're alive when you weren't supposed to be. Fletcher's tired eyes met his. The machine doesn't forgive mistakes. And you, Captain, you're a mistake they can't afford. Reed's hands curled into fists. Then let's fight back. Let's put everything out, every file, every face, every account. Burn their cover to the ground. Fletcher shook his head, slow, heavy. It won't work. You'd be dead before the story hit the wires. They control the narrative. They control the messengers. Reed slammed a hand against the desk. Then what's left? Fletcher leaned back, voice dropping low. Survival and preparation. You keep your team alive. You hold on to that drive Hayes gave you. And when the cracks grow wide enough, when the dam is ready to break, you drop it all. Not before. Reed stared at him, anger colliding with helplessness. You sound like her. Fletcher's gaze flickered, almost amused. Maybe she learned it from me, or maybe I learned it from her. That night Reed gathered his men in the cabin again. The air was thick, the wood stove unlit. Carter's face was pale, haunted. Daniels leaned against the wall, arms crossed tight. Gray sat at the head of the table, silent as ever. They're coming for us, Reed said plainly. Not insurgents, not contractors, our own. Carter swallowed hard. What do we do? Run, hide? Gray's voice was gravel. We do what we've always done. We watch each other six. We hold the line. Daniels exhaled, a bitter laugh breaking through. And against who? Our own government, Jesus. Reed pulled the small drive from his pocket, setting it on the table. This is why Hayes gave it to me. A backup list. Names, accounts, the real architects. It's the reason they'll hunt us. And it's the reason we can't let them win. For a long time, no one moved. The drive sat there, tiny, ordinary, yet heavier than all their weapons combined. Finally, Gray spoke, his voice steady. Then we protect it until it's time. Reed nodded, until it's time. Days blurred into weeks. Missions came, missions went. Routine on the surface, shadows underneath. Strange inspections at the base. Men in suits watching from the periphery. A sense of tightening, like the noose had already been thrown, just waiting to snap. And through it all, Reed searched for Hayes. Rooftops, crowds, quiet streets, but she never came. No messages, no pager buzz, nothing. It was Carter who said it one night, his voice quiet, almost reverent. What if she's gone? What if that was her last play? Reed didn't answer, he couldn't. Then one dawn, as the team prepared for another mission, Reed found an envelope slipped under his door. No return, no mark, just his name in neat block letters. Inside, a single sheet of paper, coordinates, and one line. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. Reed stared until the words blurred. That night he drove alone. The coordinates led him to an overlook above the Potomac, city lights glittering below. He waited. Midnight passed, then one, then two. No one came. Finally, as he turned to leave, he saw it. On the railing, carved small but deliberate into the wood, Sentinel. No signature, no date, just a mark, a whisper carved into the world, proof she had been real, proof she had been there. Reed stood for a long time, his breath caught in his chest. Then he touched the carving with his fingertips, a silent vow forming in his heart. When he returned to base, he locked the drive deep in a hidden compartment of his kit, not to bury it, not to forget, but to wait, to carry it until the day came when the truth could no longer be silenced. And when his men asked where he'd gone, he only said, nowhere. Because some things you didn't explain, some things you carried alone. Weeks later, another mission took them across the ocean. Another operation, another silence, another battlefield. But for Reed, every shot, every breath, every order carried something more. Not just survival, not just loyalty, but a weight passed to him by a ghost who had saved them twice, then vanished. On quiet nights when the team slept and the desert wind whistled through the canvas of their tents, Reed would hear her voice again. Calm, steady, breathe, aim, exhale. And when the time comes, you'll know. He never saw Catherine Hayes again. Not in the field, not in shadows, not on rooftops. But he carried her presence like a shadow stitched to his own. And deep down he understood, ghosts don't vanish. They simply wait. And someday, when the dam finally cracked, when the lies gave way under their own weight, when the truth demanded to be heard, her silence would break in the actions of those she had touched. Reed closed his eyes one night, exhausted, head against the hum of a transport plane. He thought of her carving on the railing. He thought of her voice. He thought of her absence. And he understood what she had meant all along. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.